Today, we're discussing how screen time impacts a child's confidence, social skills, and the role it plays in bullying. With so much time spent online, how are kids coping with cyberbullying, and how does it affect their self-esteem and interactions in the real world? We'll get into it after I hit this music. Joining me this week is my good friend, Art Jury. He is a martial arts instructor out of Washington. Art, thank you so much for coming on today.
Thanks for having me, Tim. This is exciting.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk about this topic of tablets and kids. It seems like I work with a lot of parents, and I actually had a parent tell me one time their kid's going to quit martial arts because they didn't want to get off their tablet. And I was like in shock, like, really? That's going to be the reason why your kid's going to quit martial arts? Well, the parent didn't want to deal with it. So Art, I'm not sure how much of it you see in your school or with your parents, but let's just start off with how much of a distraction is that tablet for kids?
It's a huge distraction. It's an addiction for many people. It's hard to quantify how it is, but you trigger dopamine when you start to play with phones, anything with a screen. It gives you some feedback, especially if they're playing any kind of game or any kind of interaction. One of the problems with it is it replaces other things that you could be doing. I read this great book, The Anxious Generation. He had some great tips in it. And one of the big things that he points out is we've converted from a play-based childhood to a phone-based childhood, or screen-based, I guess you could say, in this case. All screens contribute to it. Phones, it seems, are the biggest problem because they're so portable. And people think they're making good connection with their family and friends, but they're not. The communications isn't synchronous. It means it doesn't happen one-on-one all the time. Because a lot of times, like if you're on Facebook or any of the apps, you'll send something out and you're not actually taking turns talking to somebody like we are right now. This would be considered a slightly better interaction because I can see you moving around and smiling or giving me feedback on how I act. Particularly with children, as they are learning how to be in the world, you learn that by doing it with other people, not by putting things for people to like on Facebook or Instagram or whatever it is you're using. In that case, you're broadcasting one person to many. And one of the problems with that, and one of the things that they're seeing more and more, is children are very anxious because it's high stakes when you're broadcasting. Like right now, you and I are talking, a whole bunch of people are going to see this. It makes it a little more nervous.
So are kids getting anxious because of their tablets and phones, or are they just anxious at the stage of development?
There's some things that go into making them more anxious. So one of the things you lose with all the access to phones and tablets and all that stuff is sleep. When you have less sleep, you're less balanced in your brain and you're more likely to be anxious. But the bigger problem is you don't learn how to socially interact with other people in real life because you don't get the same feedback. Even what we're doing right now, I can see your face. I can see, maybe you yawn and fall asleep because I'm talking or whatever, or laugh. See, we have an instant feedback there. But if you're doing this on Facebook, Instagram, something like that, you're going to get your feedback later.
Yeah.
And a delayed feedback doesn't feed you the same chemicals in your brain as instant feedback. Also, there are cues that I will not pick up over the computer screen like this that I would if we were in person. And it's a complicated skill set to interact with another person in a good way. And you can only learn it by doing it. Just like I teach martial arts. You can talk to somebody about how to do a front kick. You can draw a picture, or you can show them how to do a front kick and then help them model the right behavior in person. But teaching it online, a lot of us learned this if we tried to teach during COVID. It's a lot harder.
Yeah.
Skilled instructors probably can make it through. But if you're 5, 6, whatever years old, you're not a skilled instructor and you're not a skilled learner, really. You're programmed to pick things up. Our biology is set up that way, but you're not skilled at it. You don't know how to tease out the extra information because you don't even know it's there. And if you're not getting that feedback, that's how we grow in groups and how we get better and better as time goes by. So what they're finding is there's kind of two things. It's not just the screens, but we have a anxious generation coming up, is what they like to say, because people are overprotected physically, so you don't go out and play and do things with your body. Instead, you sit and look at a screen. I don't know if you've experienced this, but I have gone to like meetings for people or even classes that I've attended, and you'll see 30 people sitting in a room. There's no lecture going on yet. You're waiting for things to start. They're all sitting there and staring at their phones.
Art, I'm guilty of that. I am guilty of that. So I go to my B&I meetings, and sometimes I should be networking, but I'm catching up on my emails, catch up on social media. So,
and right there,
guilty.
You're getting it there, and this is something that is diplomatically hard to express to parents, but they are modeling the behavior the child will try and follow. Certainly before they're teens, they lean more towards family than they do peers. So they're modeling that, number one. Number two, especially when children are very small, one of the ways they develop empathy and connection to people is by seeing your face and having your undivided attention as a parent. If you are giving them partial attention and, staring at the phone all the time, oh, yeah, that was great. The kid can tell. And I'm sure you've experienced this as an instructor as well, where you're sitting there and the kids are doing their black belt test or whatever, and the parents are looking at their phone. They're not looking at the kid doing their thing. People think that the kids don't notice. They notice. Yeah. They notice everything. And when they do that, how does that make you feel? I mean, if we're sitting here talking and you can see me just sitting here reading a book and not looking up and paying attention, you're not going to feel good.
Yeah.
I mean, you're an adult. You'll get over it. But a kid, that's not so much. They're programmed now that the phone or the screen is more important than them.
Yeah.
What kind of message you send there? This has been a fascinating book to read. I read a bunch of books before I settled on this one. He has some practical applications and things we can do to help things get better. But it's not looking good right now. He has a lot of hope. He's seeing a lot of changes, which are hopeful.
Yeah. So do you think that excessive screen times for kids increases their vulnerability to bullying and cyberbullying?
Oh, yes. You are less able to interact correctly with people. So you're not good at giving feedback.
Yeah, I suppose you can't give it an emoji. It's kind of hard to give it an emoji to someone talking to you.
Write it on your forehead.
Yeah.
So and I believe, from what I've seen, at least a portion of the bullying problem is miscommunication. Yeah. Somebody comes up to you and they do something that they think is funny, but it really hurts you. As an adult, well, not all adults, but hopefully most adults have developed the skills to say, hey, that wasn't cool. If you're a kid, you're learning how to interact with people. Somebody has just done something that they think is funny, and they hope everybody else thinks it's funny because, like it or not, most people want to be part of the group and part of the crowd. So they do something they think is funny or informational or whatever, and it hurts your feelings. Well, if you're a kid and you haven't learned how to express that by interacting with people one-on-one, you don't know how to express it. So maybe you feel bad, you feel sad or whatever. The kid likely also misinterprets it because he's also the bully, has spent a lot of time online on videos and stuff. He doesn't read the cues back. So now you got a problem. I strongly believe that very few bullies are actually evil. Nobody's the villain of their own story, right? They want stuff. They want to be part of the group. They want to have friends. One of the ways you get friends is to be interesting and entertaining. Another way is to create somebody who's an outsider, and then you're part of the group and they're outside and you become part of the group. If kids have a more limited way of communicating, they're going to pick less effective ways because they don't know better.
Yeah.
It's not just that they're like the mean guy. They're trying to do their thing to get what they want. They just don't know how to do it properly.
So, Art, what you're saying is kids that are participating in bullying behavior are doing it to make themselves look better in front of a group of kids,
Yes, that's
and they
pretty
just
much
find someone
everybody's goal.
easy. Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah, we all want, it's kind of funny. We all want the same thing. A lot of times we just don't know how to get it. We
Yeah.
want to
So
be accepted.
somebody's got to be the butt of the joke, basically.
Yes. Well, we want to be accepted, and we want to, we're a social animal. I also have a Bachelor of Science in Psychology, and this is fascinating to me. We crave being part of the group, being part of society. People who go off and are by themselves, there's a few people that can do it, but very few. People get off into weird stuff when they're off by themselves and they don't have any feedback from the group, the social animal. And I believe this is part of what happens with bullying.
So, because kids may experience bullying in person, like you said, they could just become the butt of the joke. Do you think they feel safer online?
Yes. Well,
Okay.
and also they're kind of programmed that way from their parents because people have changed in probably the 70s when I was growing up. Yeah, I'm old. You went out and played. I mean, I can remember I'd get on a bicycle with my friends. We probably rode a mile, and we just had to be home by the time the lights started to buzz and turn on at night. We have dinner or whatever. We go out, ride. Our parents didn't know where we were. We didn't have a phone. Neighbor parents probably knew. And there was a certain amount of trust at that time. One of the reasons why parents were confident in doing that is they kind of trusted the other adults, which is kind of funny because the crime stats say that it was a lot more dangerous then. But they knew that, if a kid fell on his bike or whatever, Aunt Edna or whoever it was in the neighborhood would either help him out or call him so that they could get it taken care of. But today, until kids are like 11, 12 years old, usually they're not allowed to be by themselves. They don't have agency in themselves.
Yeah.
And if you can only really learn things when there's some risk, but not too much. Like this interaction between me and you, if you were videoing this and sending it out to a bunch of people, if I make a mistake, I've made a mistake with one person. You either correct me, we get over it, or not. It's a pretty small loss penalty on my part for making a mistake. Now, we broadcast this out to a bunch of people. If I make a bad mistake, like the Elon Musk thing where he did the hand gesture.
Yeah.
They make a mistake. Now, Elon Musk's an adult and he's pretty stout. But imagine a kid doing that in front of a stadium. They don't know
Not
better.
knowing what's going on. Yes.
They've basically committed social suicide. They're done. Everybody's going to hate them and they're going to tease them and they're going to have a bad day.
So, Art, though, it seems like we got a double-edged sword, though, because if kids don't feel safe with a group of kids in real life, but then they isolate themselves on social media because maybe they just feel safer there because they can't get picked on, but yet they could get exposed to cyberbullying and they're losing that social interacting skill. As a parent, how do I navigate that? Because I know my kids need to be off the tablets. They can't be interacting on social media. They need to be with real kids. And yes, there are rude kids out there as well. I need to teach them that that's part of life. This is how you handle rude people in real life. But how do I relay that message that in reality, social media is not as safe as you think it is. It's actually going to be worse hiding in your bedroom on social media than it is in front of people. You see what I'm saying? Now that I'm saying it, maybe I'm confusing myself. It's like, how do I do that?
Excuse me. Sorry. It's an interesting thing because we've created a problem based on a group. I mean, we've all kind of created this situation where, and it comes from the parents. Your parents are anxious because they're worried about the child physically. So they see this great new thing, the internet, and they're like, oh, well, they can't get hurt on that. The problem is they're very careful physically. They protect children physically. They wrap them in cotton batting physically. But on the internet, they give their child's brain basically to the internet without any filter at all. And some of the things that are the bigger problem, especially when the children are younger, they develop from the cues, because we're going to learn, as particularly as children, we're going to learn no matter what you do, unless you set them in a box and do nothing. They pick up the cues from social media because that's where they're at. One of the big problems with this is opportunity cost, right? If you are spending 16 hours a day, which is not an unlikely number today, on a computer or on social media, those 16 hours, you're not learning how to play the guitar. You're not hanging out with friends and probably doing stuff you're not supposed to do that hopefully doesn't hurt nobody too much. I remember riding bikes and we made ramps and jumped off them, and we probably shouldn't have survived some of that stuff, but we did. If our parents had known about it, it would not have happened. But now everybody's got a phone, they've got social media. So their parents let them experiment online where there's low physical risk, but very high emotional, mental risk, because they're not doing other things with their friends.
Well, one thing, with my daughter, my oldest daughter, she's autistic, so communication is not like her thing to do. So she developed a group of online friends on the platform called Discord, which I never heard of until my daughter started using it. But what do online communities play in either supporting or harming a child's social development and sense of worth? Because it seems like that's where kids are going to these days. They're like, say, well, I am with my friends. We're just all online together.
It's tricky because, and that's actually one of the things that they often list as a gain, is that you get access to more communities and stuff like that. Because, maybe there's only 5 people that have your disorder or problem in your city, but worldwide, there's a lot. And you have access to that. But it comes back to the same problem. You do not get the same quality of interaction over a computer that you do when you're one-on-one. So you don't get the same feedback. You don't gain the same skills that you would gain in a one-on-one communication. And you're taking the time that could be spent one-on-one with somebody, and you're spending it on a computer. So it is tricky.
Is there a tactic that you may have to convince your kid otherwise? Because as a parent, I had a hard time convincing, Jazz, like, go outside, get real friends. But she feels safe with that group.
Well, one of the things you have to remember is your child does not really know how to make friends. And the other thing to remember is we got here as a community. We're only going to get out of this hole as a community. What many people are doing, and what this guy recommends in the anxious generation, is that you contact a couple other parents in your area, maybe people that are kind of friends of your kid or might possibly be friends in the future, and say, look, these screens are taking over our kids' lives. They're becoming screen kids. My aunt calls them vidiots.
Idiots.
Maybe not kind, but it's got an element of truth to it. So you group up with 2 or 3 other people and their kids, and you say, hey, I've been reading this book, and this guy says that we need to keep phones out of kids' hands until they're 14. And we need to not let them have social media accounts that they can access privately. You've got to have some give and take because everybody's doing it, and it's part of the social landscape these days. But on a computer at home or a tablet where you can monitor it and be a guardrail for your child is a lot better than a phone that they take into bed and use under the covers at night instead of sleeping. But if you can make a pact with a couple other families and say, the other thing you have to do is you have to replace that with something. If you're taking away their dopamine connection, you say, okay, now, can we make an agreement that we're going to have our kids together every Friday night or every other Friday night. We'll get together and they'll do something fun. We'll go to, a game place or an amusement park or have a sleepover, whatever. Something where they are getting something out of it to replace what you're having them not do, which is beyond computers and stuff. An interesting thing, they've done a fair amount of research. If you can get people to be off social media for 2 weeks, a lot of their behaviors go back to what would be more normative when I was growing up, where you find it better to spend time with people in person. And because these folks that make these social media engines, they're really smart. Yeah. They understand B.F. Skinner did a lot of work with this. He was a behaviorist, a psychologist. The way to get people to basically get programmed and addicted to something is to give them reward every so often. And that reward comes back at different times. So like if you get a reward for pushing a button, like he did things with pigeons and mice and stuff like that. So they get food when they push a button. If they get food every time they push a button, they don't get addicted to pushing the button. If they get food from one time to every 10th time, they get addicted. It's just like a gambler. That's why gamblers get so tied in. The same thing happens with the social media. When you're doing Facebook and you post something and you get a like, there's your hit. But you don't always get likes. It's a variable reward system. They set it up very carefully, and they've got all this fancy algorithms and stuff that give you variable feedback to get you hooked.
Yeah.
Because their goal is to occupy all of your time.
Kids will do their craziest things for a like on social media, and it's just ridiculous. There was I don't know if you heard about that boy and that girl. This was a couple years ago where he wanted to become famous on YouTube, so he held up a book and told his girlfriend to shoot at the book, and actually, she did, and actually killed him. It's like, this is what kids are doing just to get a like, to get social media famous.
Well, one of the things that it's interesting you say it that way, adults will do the same thing. And as this has grown to become a all ages phenomena, you have a lot of things pointing children towards just being on screens and not doing things in real life. That's actually one of the great things, one of the reasons why I became a martial arts instructor. You don't see a lot of people using phones while they're sparring or doing any interaction in a martial arts class. I certainly wouldn't allow it for any of my students. So they have to interact in real life. You have to learn to read cues so that you know if they're going to punch you or kick you or what direction they're going.
Yes, learning that body language, big one.
And the martial arts brings you to a very, I would say, primitive feedback system. If Johnny is looking out the window and Joe kicks him and Johnny gets hurt, you look over and you say, well, Johnny, where were you looking? Were you looking at your partner or were you looking out the window? For one, they don't want the embarrassment. For two, it may have hurt a little bit. And they get automatic feedback. They get a correction right away. And it's in a relatively safe place. What this fella recommends is that we create more of those safe spaces and we let children have a little bit more independence. So, because no learning really happens unless there's some risk. The trick is to make the risk managed so nobody gets hurt bad. And that's one of the keys to learning social interactions. One-on-one, like I said before, you make a mistake, maybe you lose one friend. If you're doing it broadcast over social media, maybe you lost all your friends. So one of the things they're finding, and I don't know if you've noticed this, but if you talk to somebody who is like a teenager or in college, and they're finding this in college too, they've done some research on this, they do not like to disagree with people. They do not like to speak up. They'll tend to just agree because you can show agreement. It's pretty cheap to you to just kind of, oh yeah, okay, yeah.
You bring up a good point. That's the problem with social media is you can't have an opinion that goes against somebody else's opinion, which can start a whole nother war on social media that you never intended to start. You're just giving a different perspective on a topic. And with social media, you can't have that face-to-face interaction and, hash it out right there and understand. You have to wait for that next post. And people, when you read online posts, you may not know the context that it was written in. Maybe they wrote that as a happy, I'm just joking, blah, blah, blah. Or maybe they wrote that, or some people may read it as, well, they were mad. They wrote that with anger. You don't know. But when you have that face-to-face interactions, you can at least get that. You can understand, which will bring your conversation to be more civilized. But
yes,
it brings me up
more
to
feedback.
Yeah. So how can children be taught to use screens that foster positive relationships? Because yes, screens can be bad. We understand that, but we know the future, kids can be on screens more and more. Our public schools use the screens. They got rid of textbooks. We use screens now. So it's not going anywhere. We're not getting rid of it. So how can we as parents teach kids the correct ways to use it and to build positive relationships?
Well, the first step is you have to build your community. If you're doing it,
when you say community, do you mean your online community, or do you mean like your town?
As they say, IRL, in real life.
In real life community. Okay, I want to make sure.
If you take your child and you say, you may never use the screen again, you're done. They are one person and now they're alone because everybody's on screens. If you, like I said, you get with your child's friends, parents, and say, hey, we started on this phone thing and it's not going so well. My child's having some issues. How about you? Chances are they've recognized the same thing. And they say, I read this book, and this guy says one of the things we can do is we can get together and we kind of make a pledge that we're not going to let our child have a phone until they turn 14. Maybe a flip phone, but no smartphone. And now you've got 2 or 3 kids, and they can form a community that are not online. Because all of this is about creating community. They are going to create a community. The thing that you as a parent have to choose is what that community is going to be. Is it going to be online? Is it going to be in person? They will learn better or more effectively how to interact with other people by interacting with other people in person. It's how we have done it for hundreds, thousands of years. There's no reason to think that we can just jump tracks and completely change and have it work well with the wetware that we have in our brains now without having a problem. Because right now we're having a problem. I see bullying, poor behaviors, and a lot of it I don't think even is really bullying so much so, as I said before, as miscommunication. They never learned how to interact properly. So they do what they do. When I was growing up, I grew up in a small town in Eastern Washington. If the things I read online, I quite often notice, I'm like, if I said that when I was growing up to one of my neighbors, it would not have ended well for me. It would have physically not ended well, likely. And if it didn't, my neighbors would have gone to the other neighbors and said, hey, this guy, he stole my car, or, whatever you can think of. He was rude to my daughter, whatever. You're going to have a reputation instantly. Now, one of the things, and they talk about this in the book, social interactions over the internet have a low cost if you just abandon them, right? There's a low bar to get in, low bar to get out. You just change your username. It's all gone. And you don't get that feedback, and you don't have that group, that community holding you accountable for what you've done.
So I totally understand building your community first, and say we do that. So I got my kid to build an online community first, but they're still going to have that tablet, that phone when they get to be high schoolers. How can I teach my child right now the way to use social media in a positive way to build positive relationships?
One of the most important things, and you can look at the graphs for all the bad stuff, suicide, and how people reporting how anxious they are, a lot of other things. And it all comes when smartphones appeared. A tablet is not quite the same as a smartphone because you can't stick it in your pocket and go to the bathroom and your parent not notice, right? It's a lot harder to stick it under your covers at night and be up all night and not sleep and get exposed to the internet when you have a tablet versus a phone. So the important thing is what he recommends is that, and what he did with his children, because he has 2 children as well, they don't get a smartphone until they're 16, which not a popular choice these days. One of the ways he navigated with his children is he built communities like I'm talking about here, where like he went with his daughter's friends and he got 2 or 3 of the families to get together and said, okay, we did this phone thing. It's not going well. So we're going to take it out. And instead, we want to have the girls be able to get together for a sleepover every Friday night. And we'll take them to carnivals and we'll take them to shows or whatever they want to do. We'll let them set what we're going to do. We'll set a budget, so it's not crazy. But they'll go out and they'll have fun, but they're not going to have their phones. And his daughter was good with that. And she's gone on to do more good things. The main thing is whenever we want to change a behavior, we have to give something that is positive because this is the opportunity cost, right? If their opportunity is to be with their friends in person, they can't spend that time online because they're with their friends in person. And if they don't have a screen, they can't all be staring at screens while they're sitting together.
So do you believe, Art, that kids can, though, build a positive relationship on social media? Or is it just best to have our kids, as they would say, do IRL in real life?
I do believe it is possible. And even more importantly, I think that we have to make it possible because the people that run all the social media stuff, they have a lot of brains and a lot of money, and they're using it to hook our children. So just like we teach our children not to drink in excess or do other things that are bad for them, we have to teach them how to navigate this. One of the keys is, and I know you know a little bit about brain development, as the brain develops and more of the prefrontal cortex develops, children can make better decisions with more information. So one of the critical things is, that's one of the reasons why they cut it off at age 14. They say no smartphones before age 14. Children likely are not even physically capable of controlling their behavior before that age because their brain just hasn't developed enough. He likes to tell a story. One time he was riding in his car with his daughter, and she had his iPhone or iPad, I think it was. And she said, "Daddy, take the iPad away from me. I can't look away." Because she'd been hooked and programmed, and she was still smart enough to recognize it was a problem. So he took it away, and she felt better. One of the things people don't understand is the behaviorists that, like B.F. Skinner, some of the stuff that we program into ourselves becomes a reaction, like the Pavlov's dogs. The bell rings and you salivate because you're anticipating food. When we smell food cooking, if you pay attention, you'll notice you start to salivate. You're like, oh, yeah, I'm going to be eating that great food here in a little while. Nobody told you to do that. You're not doing it consciously. You've been programmed to do that. They use the same techniques on the internet, and we need to teach our children how to live in that world. But we also need to recognize that you can't expect a newborn baby to run. They're just not capable. And you can't expect a 10-year-old to be able to control looking at an iPad or something. They're just not capable. They don't have the brain mechanism to do it yet. They're not born knowing how to do it. We've got to teach them how to do it. And we've got to give them space to play. Play is, I read several books about play. It's really interesting. We learn so much better through play than we do repetition.
Well, a lot of kids will associate play, though, playing games on their tablet. So we got to teach them to play with physical toys, not the games on their tablet.
The physical stuff. Because are people becoming... I remember when I was growing up, I would see people kind of plinking around on guitars and doing other things. And I'm also a radio amateur. We build stuff and do things in the real world. those groups are getting smaller. There's fewer and fewer people doing it because the opportunity cost. They're always online, so they're not actually doing things with their hands. I'm considered in my community a fairly handy guy. If somebody has a problem, any of my neighbors, they'll call me up. I'm not a plumber, but I can do most plumbing things. I'm not an electrician. I can do most electrician things. But the only reason I can do that because I wasn't on my phone.
Art, I want to thank you for coming on my podcast today. But before we leave, do you have any advice for parents to help get their kids off that tablet and participate more in the real world?
Create a community. That's what everybody craves. We're social animals. Humans are literally programmed to interact with other humans. Anything that comes between that makes a problem. We've been doing it this way for thousands of years. Create a community. It is way easier to do anything if you're in a community. For me, a lot of my community is martial arts.
Same here.
And maybe other people have other, maybe you're into chess or tennis or whatever. But look to your community and work with them. They all have the same problem. And for the most part, they all have the same concerns. Now, we all deal with it maybe a little differently. But look at what the goal in the end you want. Work towards your end goal, right? Your end goal is to have a happy, healthy human that can interact in the world and get some cool things done. First step, they got to learn to communicate with other people effectively. And they have to learn how to build their own community. Make them a part of the process. It is their life. You're just the guide who hopefully is a little further up the mountain than them. And you're saying, this is the path. No, you go that way, you're going to fall in a ravine. Don't do that. Yeah, the listening gets variable as they become teenagers. But if you laid a good foundation when they're younger, you've allowed their brain to develop so that they're capable of understanding the correct behavior.
I like that.
A whole lot better chance.
I like that. Create a community, because now if your kid gets exposed to some in real life, IRL, I got to say my acronyms right. If your kids gets more of that in real life connections with kids, they're not going to need their phone so much to talk to them because they're going to be in real life. And it's more fun to hang out with somebody in person. Imagine going out to dinner. Imagine Art, me, you are going to go have dinner. Let's do it on Zoom. That's not fun. I want to do it in person. So
we did that a little bit during COVID, and it wasn't fun. A lot of people learned that. It is not fun.
No, it's
not
always
as fun.
So
different things get triggered when we are in person. I can't touch you on the shoulder or shake your hand. I can remember one of the things that I can remember is I remember hanging out with my friends, like I said, and doing things we probably shouldn't have been doing. But today, people spend a significant amount of their time, their free time, 70, 80% online. They are not doing it in person. If I had lost all of those experiences growing up, I would not be a very good person, I don't think.
Yeah.
It's a very rich world in real life, but there is more risk. And people have learned to be anxious and afraid of risk. We need to overcome that.
Yes, because risk is all a part of life, is having those risks.
But community can back us up. They teach us the way to go and help hold us to standards. But at the same time, they got our back because they're our community.
All right, Art.
If you don't have community, it's going to be kind of sad.
Yes. So Art, community is what's going to help keep your kids. Building that community is going to help keep your kids maybe less off that social media, get interacting with more people. I love it. Art, if people want to get a hold of you or find you on social media, are you on social media? Can we find you? If so, where can we do that?
I'm, as part of my school, Dauntless Martial Arts, dauntlessma@fastmail.com is an email address.
Okay, you're going to have to spell Dauntless for me because I'm not going to be able to figure that one out. So go ahead, spell us your website.
DAUNTLESSMA@fastmail.com. DAU.
So that's your email. That's your email address,
that's my
right?
Email. And my Facebook is Dauntless Martial Arts.
Okay. And I will put that
in Puyallup.
If you're watching this on YouTube, I will put all that on the screen. You just saw it go by a few seconds ago. If you're listening, you know where to find it. It's in the show notes. Art, I want to thank you for coming on today.
Well, thank you for having me. It's been quite an experience. This is my first official podcast, so if I made mistakes, now you know. You just got to do it.
No one's going to know because I'm going to edit this out. No big deal. You did fine, Art. Thank you so much. Have a good day.
Thank you.